Hello friend, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're doing well. It's Tim here, and in this video, I wanted to do something a little bit more casual and relaxed. In this video, you'll be watching a speed paint for one of my new garden paintings, and I wanted to share some of my favorite landscape painting tips with you. So with every painting, I like to start with a drink. Today I chose an ice cap from Tim Hortons, and I love Tim Hortons, so I'm so excited for pumpkin spice to finally be back. I always think it's too early for pumpkin mania to begin, mostly because I don't like saying goodbye to summer, but I absolutely love it. So to begin, I generally start sketching and blocking in my colors and shapes, really adjusting my perspective here and there. I don't really like to focus on any details in the stage. This part of the painting is for big decisions and big paintbrushes. You don't want to commit to something and spend a lot of time detailing in this stage too, because if you want to make changes later on, you're going to ruin all of your hard work just to end up covering it up. So I don't even let myself use those smaller brushes. I would also recommend when blending to use the blending tool with the same brush that you painted with. That way the textures really match really nicely. It'll be a huge part in keeping the unity of texture consistent throughout your painting. I probably paint way too close to, and it's good to keep switching back and forth to check for balance, but I usually find if the texture looks good up close, it will look good from far away too. And using the same brush for both will really help save you a lot of time from having to switch between different brushes a lot. So in the beginning and the middle stages here, I really try to avoid using a lot of saturated colors, and I try to keep my colors mostly lighter and mostly neutral. I use a lot of grays and taupes as transition shades here. It makes it a lot easier to blend colors together. I would also recommend avoiding any extremes in lighting and shadow in this stage. I actually avoid using any true shades of black or white in this painting until the very end, because I've found even painting nature that's a little bit more fantastical than real life, using really dark colors can end up making your painting look really harsh. It'll create a focal point in those places even when you're not intending something to be there. So a good rule of thumb, wherever the darkest and lightest points are is where the viewer's eye will be drawn to, so definitely use those lightest colors and darkest colors at the very end, because otherwise it'll become very difficult to adjust later on. I also like to use a lot of overlays when adding shadows and light, and in particular when adding light overlays. If your colors are too saturated to begin with, sometimes when you add white or light over top of it, it can almost make the colors underneath look muddy or almost like milky looking against those really bright colors. So if you use more of these grays and beiges as transition colors in these base layers in the very beginning, before getting to using any of these bright colors, you'll have a much easier time adjusting and changing these colors later on and adding shadows and light. In these pre-planning stages and in the middle, I like to get ideas of different plants and what kinds of colors I need for them and what their leaves look like especially. I don't want them all to just look like dots. This is mostly a fantasy garden, but I wanted to incorporate some of the local flowers I love seeing in the area that I live. There are so many hostas and hydrangeas, and more recently these hydrangea trees, I think they're called, blooming around where I live, and I'm kind of obsessed with them. They're just so pretty and fluffy looking and fun to look at. So they remind me a lot of this plant called a snowball bush, which is a fairly large bush with these large clusters of little white flowers on them. And when I was a kid at my grandparents', we used to wait until the end of summer and have these huge snowball fights with the flowers, which in hindsight probably wasn't real great for the plant, but it always came back bigger and better the next year. We had fun with it, but we were pretty ruthless as kids. So another really huge tip I have for painting large paintings, especially landscapes or anything that has a ton of detail in it, it really helps me to paint in multiple sessions and only try to focus in on one area of the painting at a time and kind of treat it like it's its own mini painting, really only focusing in on that area before moving on to the next. Paintings like this sometimes have an overwhelming amount of details in it, and if I try to focus on too much at once, I'll get overwhelmed and avoid finishing it, so I would definitely recommend finishing it in mini sessions. I've set a goal for myself this year, and I've really tried to make an effort to finish every piece that I start so I don't have a million unfinished files in Procreate, mostly just to avoid making my iPad storage angry with me. So by doing it in mini sessions, you'll have a much smaller area to work with, and each area gets the time and detailing it deserves. And if you have avoidance or procrastination issues like me, you won't end up having a million unfinished paintings in your Procreate files. So when I first started this painting, I didn't really know what my background was going to be yet, so that was going to be an interesting journey. I knew what I wanted the front to look like. I wanted it to have a rose arch, but I wasn't really sure of the direction of the background. So that ended up kind of being an interesting journey to go on. I knew I wanted it to have an almost endless feel to it, kind of like a dream. I kind of played around with a couple of different things, and I really like what I ended up going with. I actually kind of made a goof too and collapsed my layers too quickly, so I couldn't paint behind the front. And unfortunately, I did it in the session before, so I couldn't go back and undo it. So I was just like, okay, well, that's just what it is now. So, but it all ended up being fine anyways. I ended up just painting over top of it as best as I could. So reaching the end stages of these paintings, this is where I now really focus on the details, the colors, and the lighting. And this is probably my favorite part of every painting, is getting to choose where and what direction the lighting is coming from and getting to pick the time of day, because this will really determine what direction and how the shadows and light interact with the image and really bring the painting to life. In this painting, I really wanted to focus towards the back of the garden, drawing the viewer's eye through the image and almost giving it kind of the feeling of walking through a secret garden with the lighting. These paintings have really given me a way too to control the chaos for a moment, because sometimes my brain doesn't turn off and it gives me a little bit of a sense of peace through my day. I sometimes have a really hard time concentrating, and this is one of my only activities I can sit and do for 8 hours without getting bored. Sometimes I paint for so long that I'm like, okay, what year is it? What day is it? I don't know what time it is. I'm like, it was light and now it's dark and now it's 4 o'clock in the morning. But I definitely recommend eating and drinking throughout and taking little breaks and checking in with yourself, because it's so easy to lose track of the day. So when I paint these, I'm actually only using one main brush to paint with for most of this painting and to blend with. I switch occasionally over to the soft airbrush or to the water pen or to the Narender pencil, but mostly I just end up using the damp brush for the entire painting. This is my favorite brush to use, and I was so bummed when they took it away from the iPad, so I'm glad I grabbed a couple of copies of it. It's still available in Pocket Procreate, but it's my favorite for pretty much all of my landscape paintings. So if you're looking for a good brush recommendation, I would definitely recommend the damp brush, and I do actually have a video up on my channel on how to recreate that brush from scratch. One of the biggest and my favorite tips I can give you to really add dimensional highlights to your image too is to take a copy canvas layer of it and put it into black and white. You're going to add a new layer over the top of it that's blank, put this layer into overlay, and then you can use whatever brush you like with white or black. It'll create so much dimension in your painting and really pull those highlights and shadows out. And it's here in this stage too where I'm actually color grabbing from the overlay highlights we put down with different overlays from earlier on, and I'm adding just tiny little detail highlights over top of the flowers. This is one of my favorite parts to do, and it'll really make your flowers sparkle. So upcoming here, my friend Tekla used to have this beautiful bluish purple glass gazing ball in her garden. Say that 3 times fast. That was kind of a tongue twister. And I really wanted to incorporate that into this piece as well as like a little tribute to her. In these final stages, I like to go back in with a very small brush, sometimes 1% in size, and go back in with a blank overlay layer and add more detail texture to everything, just to kind of pull out some more highlights in this painting, add more grass textures. The time of day in this painting is almost transitioning to a more evening-like setting, so here in a minute, you'll see me add some almost firefly-like glows here and there. And finally, one of the most important things that I do to finish off every painting at the very end, Angry Miko here on YouTube has a watercolor for bears brush set. This is not a sponsored video. I just love his brushes and I use them almost every day to some capacity. He has a paper grain brush that, depending on what size you use of it, you can make the digital canvas you're working on look a lot more like watercolor paper or canvas, which is a huge game changer in helping your paintings look more like a traditional medium painting. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this more relaxed, more personal video. I want to do more videos like this, but I wasn't sure how to approach them. So if you guys end up liking it, please let me know below. I would love to share more videos of my artwork and my process with you. So far, YouTube has been a really fun and interesting journey. Trying to figure out what I want to do beyond tutorials has been a really good challenge for me that I needed. It puts me into unknown territory, and I think in order to grow, you really have to push yourself outside of that box. One of the biggest tips I can give you for your artwork is to challenge yourself to learn and grow every day, taking another step on that journey. And I hope that journey takes you through so many beautiful gardens. As always, if you like this video and want to see more like it, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps my channel out. And until next time, friend, happy painting.